Beautiful. There we are. Okay, we are live. Thank you everyone for joining us. You still with us there, Paul?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I can see it
Oh,
on my
okay.
screen.
Perfect. Just want to make sure. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Paul, for making the time today for what has been a months-long endeavor of getting you on the show. I'm just glad we finally found some time here.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, just to start off, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on initially when I first stumbled upon your art um, was that I couldn't quite tell to what extent your work was digitally enhanced or first manually drawn out, or like just what the process of that looked like. And I'm still not quite
Mhm.
certain as to what it is to this day. Would you be able to just walk me through that? Like, how does it go for you when you
Yeah.
come about an idea for a piece?
Yeah. Um, yeah. Do you mean as to what degree I'm using digital these days, or as opposed to traditional?
Well, just like what your process is like when you go from idea to doing the initial rough sketches to actually making the final cut.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at the moment, the past kind of, in fact, all the pieces I've done this current year have been, fully digital. So starting off with, a sketch in Photoshop, and then just taking that sketch and then getting as much reference and things, all the things that I need to do to get it up and running. And then, each stage just all on Photoshop all the way through. But previous years, it's been more of a mix. Every now and again, I do like maybe do the sketch in Photoshop, and then if it's particular, it depends on what I'm doing in the real world as well. Because it's not just in NFTs. I've also got the odd exhibition in real life to do, a still kind of show with traditional galleries. And if I need work for that, then sometimes I'll maybe do an acrylic piece, as a kind of mid stage. So some of the black and white things you see on my, in my images there are acrylic stages where I would, use inks and acrylics to produce a black and white piece, and then sort of photograph that and put that into Photoshop, and then kind of do digital on top. And then at the same time, there was one I did just in December there, which was for a drop with a company called Tribal Auctions, where they wanted a physical paired with NFT. So in that case, I did the kind of sketches and things digital, and then did an acrylic piece as kind of mid, study. I would call it a study. And then after that, it was on to oil on canvas, so a fairly sizable kind of oil painting. And then once I'd finished that, so that's the physical piece that the collector gets. I also did a kind of extra couple of weeks on top digitally just to make it good enough for NFTs and for showing on digital sites. Um, so yeah, it can be a mix, but I think people are still confused as to whether the work is sometimes oil painting or digital. But in the 4 years I've been doing NFTs, there's only been two oil paintings. Everything else has been digital. So
I see.
at the
I
moment,
see.
mostly. Although previous to NFTs, I was an oil painter by trade, if you like. I did 15 to 20 years almost of oil painting in kind of traditional galleries before I kind of got into digital art.
Oh wow, that's a career in and of itself.
Yeah, well, it was kind of the demarcation really was the COVID pandemic. There was a kind of before that I was just working with traditional galleries and mostly oil painting. I had started to teach myself some Photoshop back then as well, but was using it mostly just to design the kind of initial stages of these oil paintings, because Photoshop's so versatile when it comes to moving things around and changing things. And then COVID hit and all the galleries closed down for a while, and then afterwards it's almost like everything sort of went online for a while, and
Mm.
that's when I sort of discovered NFTs, the NFT space, and decided to kind of experiment with. To see if I could get into this market and see how my work would be taken. And then from then on, it's been kind of full on NFTs. Really, once I got into the space, I dedicated more and more time to it, and it paired well, obviously, with my social media habits, which was basically being on Twitter all the time. And so the two of them kind of came together.
I see. So in terms of the manual work, it would just be the rough initial sketches that would be given to the collector, and then the photograph is then used to then further polish up the piece and finalize it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what I did, there was a piece I did for Nifty Gateway Drop in 2023 where I did an open edition. It was a digital Minotaur, but I did an acrylic first, in black and white, and then I photographed that, and we actually used that as a bidder's edition, so people got that as an extra. And then the physical piece was actually bought by Trevor Jones, who's a really well-known NFT artist, and he has the physical for that. Um, but yeah, and every now and again, also I like to go back to the kind of traditional materials just to get something, physical, something messier to do. Um, but as I say, this year I've hardly done any, which has been mostly because I've been so busy with the digital stuff. I've just had to kind of put my head down and get on with that.
Yeah, because I would imagine there's quite the process when it comes to doing the work manually. Um, I mean, you yourself, you would know more than I, and considering that you've done this
Yeah.
for 15 years up until that point, um, and you certainly made the pivot. Now, when you initially started out this career in terms of the traditional art form,
Mm.
did you like have a background? Were you classically trained? Did you go to school for it, or was it all just like self-taught through tutorials and people that you'd met?
Yeah. It's a kind of weird mix of the two. I went to art college, what we call it. It's called art college here in Scotland. And people might think, oh, wow, you've been classically trained. But when I went to art college, and they're still like this now, there's four art colleges in Scotland, and they're all kind of, they're parts of the universities here. And none of them train you to do art. They're basically kind of almost like free for alls. You get studio space and you do get tutorials and things like that, but you're expected to just experiment and be creative, and so you can go to life classes and things off your own back if you like, and you can teach yourself to oil paint with all the kind of sorry, the space that they have, the big studios and things like that. But in terms of going in every day and just drawing and learning how to draw, or going in and learning how to paint, it really wasn't like that at all. Especially when I was there, which was in the kind of late 1990s. It was at the height of the what they called the YBA movement in the UK, the Young British Artists, and it was a Turner Prize, and it was Damien Hirst and Tracy Emin with the famous Unmade Bed, Damien Hirst with the Pickled Sharks, and it was conceptual art that was the big thing at the time. So when I went to art college and did, a course in fine art, drawing and painting, all the tutors were, dead set against anybody who was actually trying to kind of oil paint in the way that I was. So yeah, it was kind of, so people say to me in DM, I get DMs sometimes and things. People say, "Oh, did you train at art school and all that kind of thing?" And I sort of did. So I was glad to get the time and the space to experiment and to improve myself. But most of my oil painting and all those kind of things, I sort of taught myself from books, and obviously some of the tutors were able to help with certain things, but mostly it was kind of a discovery, a place to discover yourself and your creativity and all that kind of thing.
I see. Yeah, and I'm just looking up the movement here, the unmade bed.
Yeah,
It's an interesting
but
choice.
well, yeah, that was a very famous piece of art at the time. It won the Turner Prize, and
Wow.
it was very controversial because people were like, "Well, is that art? Is it not art?" And then people would say, "Well, it's art if it's in an art gallery, or it's art if an artist made it." And then other people were like, "Well, it's just an unmade bed. I could do that." The whole debate, was raging when I was at college, and most of the tutors were, very much for this kind of work. and there were lots of students who did this kind of work as well. It means that for some of them, they went through 4 years of art college and didn't really learn any skills at all, other than how to think critically about their art, if you like. But I was kind of dead set on sort of learning how to paint if I could. And so, there was a lot of resistance from some of the tutors, but in the end, I kind of got through it and got a decent degree at the end of it.
I mean, it is certainly art, regardless of what
Yeah.
anyone thinks of it. Now, like another question is like whether or not it's good and whether or not it connects with the audience in a meaningful way, or what other
Mm.
criteria you want to set upon to judge it in terms of whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it is art. Not
Yeah.
not my thing personally. I don't
No,
know.
well, I was never
Yeah.
particularly interested in it. I didn't really. At the time, actually, I was in my teens and things, so I was actually kind of you go through that stage of being quite angry when you're younger when you don't
Hmm.
agree with somebody's point of view. So I think for a while I was quite vocally against it, and then I just kind of chilled and thought, well, actually, you know what? I'm happy doing what I'm doing, and if they want to do that, that's fine. And actually, somebody like Damien Hirst, I kind of admire him now for what he did and for how he kind of grew in that art market. And in fact, Damien Hirst went on to kind of do oil paintings eventually, anyway. And didn't just stick to that kind of one conceptual art.
Yeah, I heard some time back he actually bought a ton of his own work back, like the physical
Mhm.
pieces, and burned them in one way or another, or like just destroyed them and
Yeah,
created digital NFTs of them so that the NFTs actually had much more value now because they were the last surviving relics of his work because there were no physical pieces of them.
yeah, yeah. I remember that. I think there was a could the collectors not choose or something? Whether I can't remember exactly how it worked, but yeah, I think there was an option to either keep the physical or burn it, keep the NFT. But yeah, he's one of the only kind of big name YBA artists who got involved in NFTs at all. I'm not sure if he is anymore. I haven't seen anything from him for a while.
Yeah, it looks like here the artist told
Sorry.
buyers who bought pieces from his latest collection to choose either the physical artwork or the NFT representing it.
Yeah,
And then he
yeah. So it
wrote
was a
down
bit
the
of a kind of
details.
Damien Hirst style stunt, if you like, to make a point, maybe rather than actually, um, just produce works of art.
Yeah, and then he displayed the burning as a piece of art of its own, which, I
Yeah.
mean, that's if you're gonna do that, you might as well go all out. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so from what I gather, um you rejected the notion of this kind of conceptual art where you need a
Yeah.
paragraph to explain it and all these symbols and meaning and all that, and turned your way to classical, which is kind of funny how that's the rebellious move when when
Yeah.
everyone is trying to embrace the fact that nothing means anything and anything could be
Mm.
anything. You're like, no, no, no. There's these foundational pillars of what is art and what is beauty, and I think I'm gonna do that instead. As a teenager, like having that kind of rebellious streak, that is wow. I don't. That's so on its head that I'm at a loss for words.
Yeah, well, that's what it felt like at the time. It felt like, well, why is everybody doing this same stuff? And I could see why so many students did it because, no offense, but there wasn't all that much effort required to do some of it,
It's
other than
true.
thinking it through.
Yeah.
And the harder path really was actually trying to teach yourself, some skills, um, which I was determined to do. So but I mean, I kind of knew before I even went to college sort of what I wanted to do. I've always been interested in the human figure. Even before I went to art college, I was big into sort of comic book art. So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of had an idea when I was a younger teenager that I might go into comics and things like that. So I'd already kind of learned how to draw the human figure quite well and enjoyed all that. And then things like perspective and lighting and all these things that you need in order to build up a kind of traditional sort of picture I'd sort of taught myself through copying comic book art. And then when I went to art college, I had this kind of weird sideways move into fine art because I suddenly discovered all these great painters, Velasquez and Rubens and people like that, which I thought, wow, these are really amazing. So I kind of went off in a different direction and joined the fine art sort of faculty. And then, yeah, I had to sort of fight my way through 4 years of, resistance to what I was trying to do. I mean, there was two or three tutors who kind of understood what I was getting at and were supportive. So in a way, as long as you've got something like that, then you can kind of get through it.
So you'd always loved it, even when you were as a kid. You always just gravitated towards visual art.
Yeah, yeah, and it was part of me, I think, so I couldn't really imagine not doing it, So I mean, in sort of first and second year at art college, you did have to try different things. So you did like a 1 week sculpture block, and then you did a 1 week, design block, and then you did a week of painting, and a week of drawing, sort of thing. So you got to try all the different things, and then you were supposed to decide what kind of artist you wanted to be, depending on how much you enjoyed that sort of stuff. And for me, I loved the kind of drawing and the painting and stuff, and then just absolutely loathed everything else, So because I wasn't doing what I felt I should be doing, which was, drawing. So yeah, I was quite stubborn. I was quite, bullheaded, to coin a phrase at the time. Um, but yeah, I just knew that that wasn't for me. So I wasn't going to sort of bend in the wind just to get better grades at our college.
And that's actually cool that they got you to try out all these different mediums and settle on one that you would want to focus on. And that doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
mean that that's what you would be doing for the rest of your life, but um, to get you to a chance to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, what you like, what you don't like.
yeah, yeah. That's how it was set up. So in first year, you kind of did blocks, different blocks of one thing like sculpture. As I said, a week long sculpture project, and then you could decide whether actually this was something you were interested in or not, and then there might be a week of, some kind of video art thing, for those who wanted to do filmmaking. And then kind of at the end of first year and into second year, you had to have some sort of idea as to where you might want to go. And then you kind of applied to that department. Um, and from there, you sort of by third and fourth year, you were in the thick of your chosen subject, if you like. And for me, that was it was called at the time drawing and painting. I don't know if they still call it that because there's not very much drawing and painting actually goes on in these departments these days.
Oh yeah, do you think that it's dying out just for the sake of digital art and AI and all that?
Yeah, I think it's a funny one because there's so many more opportunities now to do what I tried to do in other places outside the kind of academic art college. If you want a proper official degree, you have to go through art college. But now there's all these schools that have popped up based on the kind of Italian version of the kind of old-fashioned academies. There's one here in Edinburgh, there's one in Glasgow, where you can go and learn traditional kind of skills like just sitting in front of a plaster cast and drawing for hours and improving your skills that way. You don't get a kind of official degree at the end of it. And you have to pay for it. It's not kind of, some of our university fees here in Scotland are free, but you would have to pay for that. So there are loads more opportunities to do it now. And I would probably recommend people to do that rather than go through the nightmare of trying to, fit yourself into art college way of thinking.
I see. I see. And you said that you had fallen in love initially, or at least at one point in your childhood with comics, which is what wanted to get you or what helped push you towards figure painting and anatomy and all that. Any particulars that stood out to you, or you just picked whatever was off the shelf?
Oh, well, I used to read, I used to had a subscription, weekly subscription to 2000 AD. I don't know if you know that comic at all.
Can't say I'm familiar, but let's look it up here.
Well, you might have heard of Judge Dredd. That's the most famous.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Judge Dredd it was a British comic, and it was really popular kind of in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And Judge Dredd was the character that they've made a couple of movies of him, and he was the kind of basis for the RoboCop kind of movie. this kind of authoritarian figure. But yeah, I used to love the whole, not just the style of art, but also it had that kind of very British sort of cynical kind of you know, anarchic kind of storytelling. So, the Judge Dredd stories were always, he was a kind of hero, but he was a sort of anti-hero because he was an authoritarian figure, in a kind of post-nuclear kind of society. So, yeah, I used to love, that was the kind of thing I used to love, kind of, it was more edgy kind of comic books. But I mean, beyond that, I used to read some sort of DC, like Ghost Rider, Batman, things like that. Not so much the Marvel, but and Swamp Thing, horror comics, things like that. Sandman, that sort of thing.
Gotcha, gotcha. No, I only asked because there's this one artist that I don't think is he still alive? Oh, he is. Yeah. Goes by the name of Alex Ross. He does a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
work. Let's see.
it's sort of hyper realistic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's. I think he paints it in gouache. From
Yeah,
last I heard. But yeah, these like he did this one series, not series, but there was this comic. I think it was called Kingdom Come, which is this mini series that they made of the DC world. Which when
yeah,
I saw the art, it reminded me of why I loved the idea of or not the idea, but like just superheroes in general, or how they used to be drawn in old comics because it was supposed
mm,
to be like this ideal Greek statue like physique, both male and female, in like the most perfect form, and everything was just like every detail down to the wire was exactly where it needed to be. The way that the light refracted off of the certain parts and costume materials. I don't know what kind of a man it takes to make stuff like this, but it is nothing short
yeah,
of incredible.
yeah. No, he is a good artist. Yeah. I can't remember. I did read one of his Marvel series that I think my brother had as a graphic novel. I can't remember the name of it now. And yeah, his stuff was pretty impressive. Yeah. Especially, I think, doing a sort of comic strip where every single panel has that amount of detail and that amount of kind of research gone into it must, it takes a massive amount of effort.
Yeah, for every page to have that exact
Mm.
same consistent style and aesthetic and coloring and everything, and yeah, it's just it boggles the mind. I don't know how one man could have done that. I mean, yeah, like yeah, teams, assistants, and all that, sure, but still, nonetheless, that it's a testament
Yeah,
to his work. Yeah, in some ways, people have made this connection between comics before. It's the same idea of the myths that they had of their own Greek and Roman gods, and I mean, well, whichever gods, um, way
yeah,
back when. Except now it's just put into a modern context.
yeah. That's right. I mean, the Greek heroes, they do have superpowers, or some of them do anyway. Excuse me. Seeing as they're kind of half, you're usually sort of half god, half man. One parent is usually one of the gods. And so the likes of Hercules, who's in the Marvel comics anyway, Hercules.
He is, yeah.
Um, yeah, but these guys are, yeah, they were kind of proto superheroes, if you like. Although to be honest, they did things that weren't very heroic. I mean, in the Greek myths, Hercules did murder his own family and all his children in a fit of madness. And then that was why he was punished with the 12 labors. Was to kind of punishment for that crime, which you don't see all that many modern superheroes doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, Frank Castle didn't kill his own family. That's not why he's tortured.
No, he didn't. It's the other way around. Yeah, somebody else did it, and then he spent the whole time trying to revenge himself. Yeah, I guess that's the closest thing to some of the Greek heroes is somebody like the Punisher, because he is more complicated. He's not just a good guy, a kind of mix of both good and bad. And most of the Greek heroes, they act like sort of petulant children, to be honest. A lot of them, even Odysseus, the hero of the Odyssey, this fantastic epic story, and then if you stand back from it, and think about actually what Odysseus does throughout the story, he basically goes from city to city and ransacks them on the way to Troy, and then uh, lies his way kind of through the whole thing, including, um, kind of going, leaving people behind. Also, and then
Hmm.
he's almost just like a kind of pirate. He's a kind of anti-hero half the time, and he gets what he wants by, by being, um, using his intelligence, but not always in a very, honest way. He's kind of wily Odysseus. He was always called because he always managed to kind of speak his way out of a problem. You know. So yeah, kind of an anti-hero really. And then on his journey back to his wife Penelope, which he spends like I think 10 or 12 years getting back from Troy, he sleeps with loads of women along the way. So
Oh yeah.
he's not even staying true to his one love sort of thing. So yeah, so not when you take these Greek heroes and step back from them a bit, then they do seem a bit, you know iffy compared to Superman, for example.
Well, I mean, for their time, that's not that's
Yeah,
probably as good
yeah,
as heroes get.
yeah. Well, they weren't shining examples of moral rectitude or whatever.
Hmm.
They were kind of even Achilles. He was in a raging huff for most of the Iliad. He just went in a huff by the ships and refused to fight, and then let all his friends get killed in the battle. So you're kind of sympathies maybe a bit low in some of these acts.
Yeah, that actually leads me to my next question. Then, where did that? How did that intersection happen between the skills that you had learned through school and personal teaching, and then this love for all of these various myths? Is it just something that you grew up with as a kid, and you were like, "Hey, I wonder what this would look like if I actually brought it to life," or are there any other reasons for it?
Yeah, it's kind of again a sort of mix of things that I'd read as a kid. So I was interested in storybooks and comic books and things like that. But I remember a couple of books I had. Um, One of them was Theseus and the Minotaur, and the other one was Perseus and the Gorgon. And I had loads of books on, monsters from, mythology or other stories. So these were things that I was interested in anyway. And I loved all those old movies. I don't know if anybody watches them anymore. The kind of Ray Harryhausen, the special effects movies with Clash of the Titans and Jason and the Argonauts. We did the kind of plasticine, special effects. And even think movies like King Kong, Godzilla, all that sort of thing. I've always loved that sort of monster movie thing. Um, and then yeah, so when I went to college, I was kind of looking around. I was teaching myself how to oil paint. At the same time, one of the things that the tutors did do was kind of push me to look for something that I could call my own, if you like. So I was doing sort of portraits and still lives and things like that, and just teaching myself the basics of oil painting. And they said, "Well, look, we can see you can do this, and you're very skilled at it, blah blah blah. But is there something more you want to do with it?" So I started to look around for stories that I could maybe illustrate or do something with, and the Greek myths kind of, were something that I'd always been interested in. So I started to kind of, although I'd been interested in them, I'd never sort of read the original texts, like Ovid or Homer. And these, at the same time as I was studying kind of old master paintings when I was at college, so I was looking at Rubens and people like that, and then you're reading about them, and these names kept popping up, Ovid's Metamorphoses or Homer's Iliad or things like that. I was like, oh, I've never read these kind of things, so I sort of bought them, and read through them myself because I never got that classical education. There was none of that in my school when I was growing up. So these stories, I could sort of read them, and then I realised whilst I was reading them, how kind of visceral and how kind of exciting they were, how sort of very modern they seemed. Quite. And another thing is, I used to enjoy lots of horror movies when I was a kid, and still do. And one of the first Greek myths I read in translation was the Death of Actaeon, where Actaeon is kind of stumbles across the goddess Diana in a wood while he's out hunting, and no mortal man is supposed to see this goddess naked. And so she kind of puts a spell on him, and he's turned into a stag, and then he's ripped apart by his own dogs. Which is a kind of horrific story, and it's gone into in great detail in Ovid when you read it. Every single dog jumping on him and tearing him limb to limb. And for me, as a kind of as a fan of that kind of horror movie aesthetic, I just thought, wow, this is amazing sort of storytelling. And that was kind of the first one that I did as a sort of big, epic kind of mythological painting in my fourth year at college. Was a Death of Actaeon. Um, and yeah, it sort of grew from there really, and sort of continued in that vein beyond college. And yeah, I can see
Awesome.
you've got the Jason and the Argonauts up on the screen there. Yeah, I used to love that. The special effects in these things. I used to spend most of the movie just waiting for the next plasticine model to turn up.
Yeah, as a kid, I had a love hate relationship with claymation. I don't know why
Mm,
it really like maybe it was just like hitting the uncanny valley too hard for me, but I feared it just because I remember there was this one movie that I saw as a kid. Probably was way too early to watch it. It had a scene that was similar to what's that famous painting? Is it Saturn eats his son?
all right, okay. Yeah, by
Um,
Goya.
yeah, yeah, there was like a scene like that in the movie at one point. And I forget, but I remember it's a core memory that I had when I was like 6 years old or something. I guess
Right.
my parents and my older brother must have been watching it. But yeah, for like a 6-year-old kid, that's that's gonna give you nightmares for weeks.
Yeah,
And I kind of I didn't swear off of like stop motion or the sorry claymation since that, but it always gave me this like uncomfortable feeling. Like there's this game called you ever heard of this game called Neverhood?
no, I haven't played that one. I don't think.
It's an old game that is all about uh claymation. It's all like the entire game is made through claymation, and I
Right.
remember for some reason I played this game also hating claymation and being afraid of it. But yeah, that also just gave me nightmares, so I tend to stay away from movies like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a. This is reminding me. Is this the thing you're talking about that you've got on the screen now?
That's right. Yeah, yeah. This is the game.
Yeah. This reminds me of a TV series I loved when I was a kid. It was here in the UK. I'm not sure if it was in the US at all. It's called The Trapdoor. If you look that up, then you'll see some nice claymation on there as well. There you go. Yeah, I used
Oh,
to love this. Yeah, as a kid, it was an amazing, spooky kind of 5-minute TV show. And the claymation animation was great. And I remember me and my mate at school kind of built our own, versions of it in plasticine at the local kind of after school club.
that's actually an interesting trend that I've noticed. Why is it that you think that there's been this so many prolific works of art, like whether it's movies, games, shows, what have you, um, that are built on this like claymation style? I mean, like the most famous being Wallace and Gromit, obviously.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
is there? Do you know if there's like any particular reason? I just like thought to myself like, huh, that's interesting. I've never really thought about this art style being localized to a certain region. And the more that I think about it, there are all these different names of different intellectual properties that have come out of the UK as a result.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure really. I'm sure the Wallace and Gromit creators. What's his? Is it Nick Park? Is the guy? I think that does it. Maybe it's just that he watched these things when he was younger as well. I'm not sure. Um, but um, but yeah, I still love seeing these things. I mean, there's the amount of care and attention that goes into just animating, a couple of minutes is just it's crazy.
It's nothing short of extraordinary. I've only done it a handful of times myself. Tried my hand at it anyways. It wasn't quite good, but even like the few times in my childhood where I tried to make some stop motion films, my god,
Mm.
like the absolute precision that you have to have, the care and attention to detail, um, understanding of motion and momentum, and yeah, I mean, there's I think there was a for Coraline that stop motion movie that came out a while back that someone did a
Yeah, I know it. Yeah.
what's it called when they speed up oh, time lapse.
Mm.
I think it's oh wait, no, animation. Someone did a time lapse of oh yeah, yeah, here it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the patience required, eh?
Yeah,
Crazy.
and all for a couple of seconds.
Yeah. What I always kind of wondered about is what if you do a scene like that and it takes you months and then you decide not to use it, you know, or it doesn't quite fit in.
Then I
Um,
guess you put in the extras.
yeah, I mean, it's just must be really depressing. You spend all that time on it and it doesn't work out.
Yeah, and I wondered too, like, how do you go about rescuing a scene? Like, let's say, I don't know, the figure that you're working with breaks apart, or I don't know, there's just some issue that cannot be fixed in post edits. I guess you would have to restart because there's no way for you to get like the exact position exactly where they were in that
Mm.
moment turned in that specific way, and the audience is going to realize, even if it's just for a brief second, that something is not right. And I guess in the chase of perfection, you wouldn't want that.
Yeah, well, I think most of the kind of current crop of stop motion kind of movies they use a mix, don't they, of CGI as well.
Hmm.
I know that the kind of the newer movies from the kind of Nick Park and that studio that did Wallace and Gromit, I think they've kind of it's a it's a mix of the two now. I think they seem to use a decent amount of CGI in them as well.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I wonder how much of that is actually done for like the animation for the characters versus like the background or anything else. Because
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, I think what was it, Chicken Run? That must have been all done in just by hand from what it looked like.
well, I think the first one was yeah, but I think the recent one seemed to be a bit more digital. You know, certainly the way that it looked. I didn't actually watch it, but saw my youngest was watching it, and it was a similar style, but it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, not a fan of the second one, to be honest. I preferred the OG, but
Yeah,
maybe it's just because I'm getting old. But I
could be.
much like the first film. It was a classic.
Yeah, the first one is great. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like a concentration camp for chickens. It's told in this like World War II style,
yeah, yeah,
down to the old aviator. Um, yeah, those are
yeah.
fantastic movies.
Yeah. They're very sort of old-fashioned Britain as well. They're a bit kind of nostalgic, you know, with as you say, the old kind of World War II fighter pilot kind of, you know, the old RAF guy,
Mhm.
all that kind of, you know, nostalgic thing going on as well. And same with Wallace and Gromit as well. It's kind of old England, you know. It's a kind of parts about a way of life that no longer exists, you know.
Yeah, no,
That's like
that was the reason for my question on it, because I was like, yeah, that seems to be a lot of cultural stock placed in this kind of art piece.
yeah,
Now, in terms of these myths, you mentioned that you grew up with them, and it's something that you kind of fell into eventually. Are there any in particular that you stick out, or any kind of themes that you love to explore more than others, of like
yeah,
complicated characters, or ones that get what's coming to them, or like anything in specific?
yeah. Well, I tend to go towards the kind of the monstrous, really. You know, especially since I got into NFTs. You know, the Minotaurs I've always found fascinating, and even Pan. You've popped up a picture of Pan there, and I prefer, you know, most kind of traditional illustrations of Pan. He's more human-like, and he's got a little goatee beard. But I kind of like him with the full goat's head because he just looks a little bit stranger. Um, and yeah, I kind of like that. I like that mix of man and beast. I don't know. That seems to be something that's quite intellectually quite satisfying. I did a whole series of paintings based around the myth of the island of Circe. And Circe was a sorceress in Greek myth that Odysseus comes across in the Odyssey. and she, is on this island, and he and his men arrive there, and some of them go ahead and then end up in her palace, and she gives them all potions, and they all turn into kind of pigs, so she sort of transforms men into animals. Um, and so that kind of myth fascinated me, and I kind of tied it in with one of my favorite books is, I don't know if you know the author H.G. Wells, the sci-fi
Oh
author.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, late 19th century. He did War of the Worlds as his most famous one.
Hmm.
He also did one called The Island of Dr. Moreau, which is based on the Circe myth, but he kind of transformed it. So Circe changed men into animals, whereas Dr. Moreau is a kind of mad scientist on this island, and he's been trying to change animals into men. So it's a kind of reversal. He's using kind of modern plastic surgery to take, a puma and try and turn it into something that looks like a man or a woman, and it's a kind of uh, it's a great little kind of novella. It's only a couple of hundred pages long, and it's told as if it's a fable or a myth. It's really quite powerful sort of piece. And I remember reading that a few years ago and thinking, oh, it'd be great to illustrate some pieces of this story. But instead of doing Dr. Moreau, I kind of went back to the island of Circe instead, and then just kind of used that myth to explore this similar kind of subject matters. And then the Minotaur ties into that as well, because he's half man, half bull. Medusa, I've always been fascinated by, again, sort of snakes in the hair, all that kind of thing. Um, So yeah, those are the kind of themes that I seem to, I've done a few centaurs over the years as well, the kind of half man, half horse. Um, I mean, the whole of, Ovid's Metamorphoses, which is, this famous uh, ancient text that was Roman rather than Greek. That whole book is a huge epic poem all about transformation. So every kind of individual myth in it, and he tells it over a kind of large, almost from the beginning of time right up to the time of Julius Caesar. Every myth is connected to this idea of either a human turning into an animal or a flower or a plant or something. And that story had a powerful kind of effect on my imagination as well. So all these themes tend to be the ones I go for when I'm, you know, looking for something new.
I
So
see.
that one
Yeah.
you've got up there, then. Yeah, that one there actually. That's a very recent one. That was just I did that in April, May. I think it was April actually. I kind of finished it, and that's very much the Island of Circe idea. So I called it. The title is Circe's Noble Isle, and the reason for that is Noble Island is right at the beginning of the island of Doctor Moreau. It says that they think that that Noble Island is the name of this island where Doctor Moreau was doing his experiments, and it's supposed to be a kind of ironic title, because he's anything but noble in the way that it all turns out. Um, and then this piece is, it's Circe's Island, but it's got a kind of slightly more modern look to it because the stuff in the background, like the barrels and things, have got, I've put a little detail of. Almost like a hazardous waste symbol on the red barrel at the back behind them there. So it's kind of mixing up the idea of this kind of, the modern myth of the kind of radioactive monster thing transforming into something else, and linking it in with the sort of island of Circe, the island of Dr. Moreau, Mad Doctor kind of themes. Um, so that's this painting is basically, all these kind of half man, half creature guys being fed in this kind of enclosure, with you can see the fence and stuff around it. And the lion man in the front there is almost like a witch doctor shaman type
Hmm.
guy. Yeah, and he's got a stick there, and on the top of the stick is I've reproduced it's a famous sculpture, an ancient Paleolithic, I think it is, ivory sculpture of one of the first works of art, one of the first kind of freestanding works of sculpture, and it's basically a figure with a man with a lion's head. So I thought it was a great kind of tie-in with with my very kind of newly created work of art and this really really ancient piece of art from yeah, there you go, that's the one. Um, and it was fascinating to me that some of these subjects that I'm doing now, you know mankind has been doing from the very beginnings of art, if you like.
Interesting. Yeah, a lot of layered themes here. I even noticed a cheeky little Triforce here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That because you played like the Link and like Zelda games, or is that supposed to have some other meaning?
No, no, well, that's supposed to be the kind of hazardous waste.
Oh,
Symbol.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, oh, okay, because that's like from that's from like the yeah the little Triforce.
Yeah. All right. I
That's what I
see.
know it
Yeah.
is. Okay,
Yeah. Well, I
gotcha.
think I'm sure if you look it up, I'm sure that's the symbol also for sort of nuclear waste or hazardous waste of some kind,
I'd always
which must have
interpreted
been.
it as the yeah this one, yeah. Oh, I guess it's in some way similar. Yeah, it's like a rendition on it.
Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, yeah, a lot of layers of different symbols here.
Yeah. Well,
Very
I think with
cool.
this one, the idea is that the island of Circe is not, not existing just way back in time. It's also existing as a place that people can get stranded on now. Almost like King Kong's Skull Island or something.
Mhm.
Um, you know, um, a place that's kind of outside the normal bounds of reality, but which, yeah, you might end up being stranded there, and then being transformed into some kind of weird creature.
Yeah, because I mean, like, certainly they didn't have tech to like to the technological advancements to make barrels, let alone craft
No.
the metal for it. So that no, that certainly comes through.
Yeah.
Okay, so now when it comes to because you could have picked any portion of this myth to improvise into a scene. Um, how do you go about actually visualizing how you're going to represent this the myth that you've centered upon? Is it just like referring to the old text and then seeing if there's some kind of a scene or a moment that captures your eyes, or the more you think about it, the more you think, oh, okay, that would actually be a really interesting way to showcase this.
Yeah. It kind of depends. Sometimes it's yeah. Sometimes I pick the myth and then I kind of research it, and then I'm looking for visual clues or visual ideas. Whatever strikes me. Other times it's almost like I start with the image and then look for the myth. Um, there was one piece I remember doing a Theseus in the Minotaur where Theseus is kind of coming out of this deep well, sneaking up on the Minotaur, and the Minotaur's asleep. And the idea for that came from sort of reading an H.P. Lovecraft story where called Pickman's Model, where he's been drawing these. This artist's been drawing these ghouls and things, but he's got a cellar down below with a well in it, and these creatures have been coming up out of the well, and he's been painting them from life. And that kind of just, I don't know why, but reading that story, I just had this idea that maybe I could have Theseus kind of crawling out of this well, and then sneaking up on the Minotaur who's fast asleep. Um, yeah, that's the one. So you can see Theseus up in the top right there.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that sort of came from reading something that wasn't Greek myth related, and then kind of going back to the Greek myths and sort of working around that.
Yeah, sorry. I gotta stop to admire your work every now and then because you're one of the few artists where like if I see this on my timeline, I can't just like scroll past it. I have to look through every single detail because I mean it's just
Right.
so
Good.
so I don't know if photorealistic is the word for it because that wouldn't I don't think it does justice to say that to your work because it's more than that. It's like it's fantastical realism.
Yeah, yeah. I remember somebody described it as a friend of mine described it as kind of making the how did he say it? Making the mundane fantastic or something like that.
Yes, yes.
or making the fantastic mundane, even, sort of taking something that's fantastical and unrealistic, and then trying to kind of make it as realistic as you possibly can. So something like a Minotaur or a scene like this, just going for realistic lighting and really sort of studying how I could make it look convincing, I guess. So realism is a big part of my style, but the surreal elements are important as well, or else it would just be a bit more ordinary, I guess. Um, and in this one in particular that you've got on the screen at the moment, the idea behind this one was to also do a piece that was, because I was always studying a lot of the old masters, especially back. I mean, I painted this originally quite a few years ago, and then I kind of digitized it for the NFTs. Put a whole extra layer of digital work on top.
Hmm.
But originally it was quite a large oil painting, and the original idea for it was, I was looking at a lot of classical art, and the classical art mostly is a kind of, is a sort of side view, almost like they're standing on a stage and you're looking at them as actors on a stage from the
Hmm.
side.
Hmm.
And I thought, with this one in particular, it would be cool to have like a kind of almost like a modern movie cinematic viewpoint. I now we would think of it as a kind of drone, from above. But we're so used to, as viewers of movies, seeing camera angles from all over the place, from above, below, you know. Whereas, in for example, the Baroque, those kind of things wouldn't be something that an artist would necessarily think of when he was constructing a scene. So this one was a kind of definite, idea about trying to make it look like a kind of modern movie or something, seen from above.
Yeah, because I'd imagine that if they took on, if this piece were to be somehow done by an artist, from way back when, I would imagine that it would be like a flat scene, from like going vertical perspective in terms of not overhead like this, but just like looking
Yeah,
at the Minotaur and like maybe just a little bit of Theseus's head popping up out of the well there. Whereas this just gives it a whole new perspective entirely. And I like that. What I also like about your paintings is that if you pay attention like to the smaller details, you start to get more questions. Like for me, I centered on the leaves here, and I was thinking, okay, well, where are the trees in this labyrinth? Is there like sunlight? Because I'd always imagined the
yeah,
labyrinth as something enclosed underground, like
yeah,
buried deep within the earth. And then I'm like, how do you even get trees to grow down there?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. Well, yeah. In my imagination, there's two kind of possibilities there. One is that they've just blown in through, you know, windows high up,
Hmm.
because there would have to be some kind of light getting in from somewhere. They've either blown in from outside, or the other one is that there's a famous story by George Louis Borges. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. I can never get it right. Called The House of Asterion, where he talks about the Minotaur in his maze, wandering about, and he mentions corridors and courtyards and things like that, as if the maze is more than just a kind of dank, horrible place, but somewhere where there's slightly more open spaces, for example. And maybe a bit more like, the movie Labyrinth with David Bowie in it, that kind of old 80s
Hmm.
movie where they are going through a labyrinth, but it's outdoors as well as indoors. And so maybe in the Minotaur's labyrinth, maybe there's the odd courtyard here and there with a tree or a bush or something, where he can maybe every now and again go and have a quiet sit down.
Yeah, very interesting. As a bit of a side note, I was earlier when we were talking about the island of Dr. Moreau, I looked it up. Turns out there was a
Yeah.
movie that was made in '96 with
Mm.
none other than Marlon Brando and Val Kilmer
Yeah,
starring in
that's
it.
right. Yeah, it was a disaster, though, I think.
Yeah, it was a bit of a tragedy. I'd read a bit about it, and it looks like Marlon Brando's daughter had committed suicide while he was doing
Mm.
the filming, and he left for his private island. And when he came back to the shoot, eventually didn't want to learn his lines. He was only given them through an earpiece. He improvised most of the dialogue, and I think Kilmer was also served. Um, Divorce papers on set.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the whole thing just seems like a
Yeah.
dude project at the start. I mean, what did they have? They had a budget of 40 mil and oh, box office. Okay, at least they made back their budget. But
Mm.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, no, I haven't actually seen it. It never appears on any streaming services or anything, so I can't. The one I've got actually is one that was made in the 1970s, I think, which is watchable, but a bit kind of, a bit boring, really. Not very well done. And then I think there's an old black and white one. I think it's been made like three times or something, but none of them were particularly good.
Yeah, yeah. There was a 1970 film made here. It looks
Yeah,
like.
I've got that one on DVD. And it's watchable, but it doesn't bear a lot of comparisons to the actual story itself. It's just takes the bare bones and then goes off on its own.
Yeah, and the other thing that comes to mind in terms of your work is that one of the reasons why it struck me and I wanted to have you on the show is that these myths are larger than life. In some ways, they are similar um, to the Bible in how they teach certain immutable lessons about human experience
Mm.
through these, obviously fantastical means and all these different heroes and villains and all that. But it's timeless in that sense, and these stories live on, and you know, there's adaptations every now and then. Like we'll see like what was the more famous one? Trying to remember. I think it was, oh my god, not Russell Brand, but there was another actor from the UK that also starred in The Gladiator. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. He was in 300.
All
Uh
right.
Let me look it up here.
What you mean? You mean Gerard Butler? No.
Yes, yeah, yeah, Gerard Butler. He starred in
Yeah.
a there was a movie where that he did where it was also one of these epics. I can't believe I'm blanking on the name because I remember seeing it like
Mhm.
when I was young and I quite loved it. How it did a really good job of transporting you back into that world um,
Yeah.
of Greek myths. I'm gonna kill myself if I don't find this. I gotta find the name because it was a fantastical picture. But the point was that every now and then we'll see renditions of these stories, but it doesn't seem to be a popular source that people kind of come back to these days more so. Like it's a lot of the movies now are centered around franchises that already exist and
Yeah.
remakes and reshoots, and I understand why. They
Yeah.
have their own
Well,
economic incentives for that.
I think they're making a new Odyssey. Are they not? Is it
Yes, with Christopher Nolan,
it's
he's
Christopher
making.
Nolan? Yeah. So that could be interesting, given how good a filmmaker he is. But I'm not sure what to expect, really.
I've heard mixed reviews of it, but it's mainly been from people that are really anal about historical depictions of things because
Yeah.
I think from the announcement when it was first announced that Christopher Nolan was doing this, people thought, "Oh, this is gonna be perfect. He's gonna do like the absolute one-to-one reimagining of this myth. Maybe not like exactly 100%, but as close as one can get in the modern age." But then they started like picking out inconsistencies with costumes and what people would wear and what they wouldn't wear, and then they had some issues with the casting. And I think that's just nerds being
Yeah.
picky nerds. I don't think that that's actually
Yeah.
representative of how people are gonna enjoy it. But I'm looking forward to it because anytime any of these great myths are
Mm.
put on the center stage, it serves as a reminder, at least to me, that uh, there's great value in these things and they're worth paying attention to. In the same way, kind of how like um, stories of Shakespeare, like we all learn about it in school, and it's a pain in the ass because the translation of the language it doesn't at all translate to modern English, and it's just one of those awful things that every school kid has to go through at one point or another in their
Yeah.
life. Um, but they still have these universal themes that any one of us will have some kind of life experience that we can relate to in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. 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 Well, Shakespeare actually has got a lot of Greek mythology in it as well. 'Cause obviously he was a very sort of learned with that kind of thing, and there's a lot of Ovid in Shakespeare. I've got a book in my bookshelf there that basically goes through all of the kind of Shakespeare plays and points out all the kind of similarities between Ovid and Shakespeare, and how Shakespeare's taken certain themes from Ovid and put them in these plays. It's quite fascinating, and I think what I really enjoyed once I kind of learned more about the Greek myths is once you get to know them and get to just become kind of part of how part of your kind of intellectual makeup, if you like, that you start to see them everywhere, because obviously these stories are reinterpreted in there. Um, yeah, they crop up, they inspire so many other things that you just, whenever in a poem somebody mentions something like an eagle or lightning or something, you tend to think of Zeus once you know a bit of
Hmm.
Greek myth. And it's usually if it's a poem written anywhere before 1950, it probably is actually related to Zeus in some way. Um,
Yeah, and I'd finally found the movie. So it actually wasn't Gerard Butler after all. It was actually Sam
oh,
Worthington. It was
oh yeah, okay.
Clash of the Titans. Have you ever seen it?
Well, I haven't seen the modern. Well, no, I have. Sorry, I have seen bits of it, but the one I loved was the Clash of the Titans by Ray Harryhausen, because this is a remake of the original one. And the Clash of the Titans that I watched as a kid is the one I used to love. Um, and again, it's the claymation kind of stuff, especially the Kraken at the end, and the Medusa that he did for that is a famous kind of scene with Medusa in it.
Oh yeah, I see it
There's
here.
there's the Kraken, yeah. So that's the original Clash of the Titans. And then the one you've watched recently is a kind of remake, CGI heavy remake.
Wow, I mean, even for back then, having this kind of not special effects, but what do they call them? There's a name for practical effects, right?
Yeah,
Um, to flood an entire chamber. I mean, wow.
yeah. I mean, a lot of these movies they still look pretty good. Yeah, obviously they have that stop motion look about them, but that's something appealing about it. That it still makes them very watchable.
Yeah, they have a certain charm to
Yeah,
them.
this is yeah. So this is Medusa here that you're seeing. So he's looking in. He's got a mirror on his shield there that you can see her without looking directly at her. So yeah, when I was a kid, I used to love this stuff.
Yeah, and I guess the next iteration of that would be there was a young adult novel that was
Oh,
uh,
Percy Jackson.
yes, that's right. Yeah, the
Yeah,
Percy Jackson films. I think they
that's right.
did they get a remake? I think they yeah, I think they did try to remake it with some kind of a
Are they
series,
not
but
remaking it as a TV series or something?
I think they did.
There was a couple of movies, and they did okay, but not fantastic. And then I think they were redoing it as a TV series or something.
I quite like the first movies, honestly. Well, I mean, I saw them as a kid, so that's who they were targeting. But
Yeah,
yeah, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief.
The Lightning Thief. That's right. Yeah, well, the books, both my kids, well, two of my kids, I've got three. Two of my older kids both read all the Percy Jackson books, and for them that was the kind of intro into Greek mythology. So that was kind of cool.
I mean, as far as intros go, like it's not bad. That it's it obviously tries to make the myth into a more modern context, but
Yeah,
more power to them by all means. Like whatever gets people to uh be involved or engrossed rather in this kind of storytelling, the better
yeah, I know. I'm
because
all for it. Yeah, I mean, I think Percy, I think is supposed to be Perseus, isn't he?
yeah, that's right, that's right.
Who is the hero in Clash of the Titans. Uh, so that's Perseus we're looking at there.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I kind of regret not having done in school. There was a classics class. I remember when I went to high school and you got to learn uh, Latin and learn about all these myths and great things. But it wasn't a mandatory course. You had to choose it as one of your electives. and I don't know why, but I always had this perception that like those kids were like just super hardcore, like into it. They spoke like Latin
Yeah.
to each other whenever they'd see each other in the halls, and I was like, man, those are just a bunch of nerds. Like I don't want to be in that class. That seems like I don't know. Like I like these um interesting stories and myths and
Mm.
language and all that, but I don't know if I have the passion to like learn a whole dead language that I'm never gonna use. But honestly, now having grown up, like I wish I had taken that course, and certainly nothing is stopping me now from immersing myself in that world. But um, yeah, I've
No, I think
as I've grown older,
yeah.
it has reminded me of like these powerful myths. They do serve a purpose um, beyond just watching it on the big screen.
Yeah, no, I mean the problem with education at school is they probably would have killed it dead for you quite quickly
Hmm.
by insisting that you learn, yeah, obscure Latin phrases and probably study obscure, Latin philosophers or something rather than actually reading some cool stories, which is what we'd rather be doing.
Yeah, because they are actually like quite dark as you as we mentioned earlier when we were talking about the uh how modern superheroes are like kind of an imitation of it, but like these all these heroes and all these great things, like they were, I mean, absolutely flawed isn't even the word for it.
Yeah, yeah.
Just as absolutely despicable people. I mean, the fact that a good like there's this meme about like Greek mythology that like Zeus, like a good chunk of his mythos is that he just went around raping people.
He did. He did. Which
Like,
sounds
yeah.
bad, but I think the idea was that that was him. In their way of thinking, that was him kind of sort of divine, putting something divine into individuals.
Hmm.
But yeah, to modern tastes, it does sound, yeah. But especially in the context of the kind of Christian gods, up high and very very kind of holy and clean and white and bright light.
Hmm.
Zeus is very much not somebody you'd necessarily want to mix with. But interestingly, the Norse myths are similar. They're pretty grim if you read those. The Viking myths. So Odin is the kind of father of the gods in Norse myth, and he is also somebody who goes around and is pretty not somebody you would ever want to meet. He's not a good or likable kind of god. He was a god of war. He was pretty. If you met him, then you were probably likely sort of dead on the battlefield, kind of thing.
Yeah, those stories were, if anything, brutal. In
Yeah.
in every sense of the word. I mean, even besides like Zeus, just the amount of uh heroes or just characters like that had killed their entire families or their fathers or their mothers or
Hmm.
their brothers even. It's yeah, it just going back to the whole education thing, it just makes me think like, man, like there's so much interesting material to draw there, especially for like for young adults. I mean, as they're getting, away from the comic books and into more like realistic and interesting themes. I mean, like that's when you learn about the World War II and the
Mm.
Holocaust, which like before then, uh, you know, all you known of conflict is, at least here in Canada, is like what the War of 1812, colonization, which I'm not saying that that didn't have its own senses like of brutality, but once you get into like World War II, things kind of get kicked up a notch, to say
Yeah.
the least. Um, yeah, and it just beggars the question why this isn't. It wasn't translated as, like, something that had a lot more depth and layers to it beyond just, like, learning a dead language or, um, looking at, like, old statues and whatnot. It's a bit of a shame because yeah, like, if I'd gone back, I would have gladly, uh, taken a class or I mean, even now, I'm beginning to get more interested in it because I've always had, like, Homer's Iliad on my reading list. I've just never
Uh-huh.
really taken the time to actually sit down and do it, but I really
Yeah.
should because
Well,
there's something about
yeah,
the classics.
yeah. These days you can get really very kind of readable modern translations, which are brilliant. I think the first time I read the Iliad, I read it in a kind of 19th century version, and it had that. ye olde English kind of feel to it, which made it even harder to read. But now, if you get kind of some of the more modern translations from the kind of 1990s onwards, really any of those are really brilliant, and really quite easy to read. I mean, they're not, it's an easier read than you think, other than the length. I mean, it's long, you're not going to do it in a couple of evenings. But I find, especially if you go for the kind of uh, poetic sort of translation, it's easy to kind of um, divide it up into more digestible chunks, so just reading 2 or 3 pages at a time and then get through it that way. Um, and yeah, you can, yeah, I mean, it's the Iliad. I mean, to be honest, most of the Iliad is about, soldiers cutting each other to pieces on the battlefield, and then bragging to each other about it. But it's still a great read, yeah, it's really fascinating. The Odyssey is probably, because of this, the central part of the Odyssey is him coming across these fantastical kind of islands and people, so the Cyclops is in there and Circe's Island and all these kind of things. So it reads more like these old movies that we've been sitting here watching, the kind of Harryhausen things, an actual kind of adventure story. So in some ways, that's probably an easier start for most people, I would have thought.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, the Iliad is actually best consumed through an audiobook if possible, because it comes from the oral tradition of storytelling,
Yeah, it does.
and so
Yeah,
a lot of it actually translates better when you hear it versus when you read it.
yeah, yeah. It'd be an awful long audiobook. That's the only thing. Easy to lose track. I think the hardest thing about the Iliad is all the names and things like that. Because there's lots of characters in it. There's the kind of the main heroes, if you like. But yeah, it's quite fascinating. What's fascinating with the Iliad is that you end up in this on the battlefield, and he takes a long time to kind of sometimes describe the background of a random character on either side, the Greeks or the Trojans, and a little bit of his background just before he gets his head chopped off or something. It's like it's very kind of human, sort of on the ground with them sort of battlefield. It's quite fascinating, but it's also very kind of gruesome. I mean, there's a lot of details to how each individual is killed on the battlefield, which surprised me the first time I ever read it.
Yeah, I guess it would help the fantastical nature of it. Now, just to pivot a little, I had heard that you recently had an exposition in, was it Buckingham Palace?
Yeah, that's right.
What was
Um,
what was that like? How did you manage to land that? Was it just like a collection of artists that were invited to display their works, or was it exclusive for
yeah,
yourself?
no, it's an exhibition called Travels with the King, and what it is King Charles. Um, Back when he was the Prince of Wales, I was taken on tour with him a couple of times. So
Wow.
I did yeah, what he does is he takes an artist with him on tour. So he does these like 10-day to 2 weeks tours of various places, and he likes to take an artist with him to experience the trip and also to do work based on it. Because he's a big fan of art in general, the King, and he does a bit of his own art. He's quite a decent sort of watercolor landscape artist. Um, so yeah, back not long after I finished at college, I think I was in my late 20s the first time I went. I was invited on a tour to um, Turkey and Jordan. So I went with him on this 10-day tour, and I was expected to do sketches as I was out there and take photographs and things like that. And then back home in the studio, kind of produced work based on the tour, and then he, viewed the work and bought pieces that he liked for the Royal Collection. And then I did another one 4 or 5 years after that to Canada, actually. Um, and so I did the tour of Canada. I think that was 2009, maybe. Maybe got the dates wrong. I can't remember. And the same thing, I kind of went around with them and then did a whole lot of sketches and work based on that. So this exhibition is him celebrating, I think it's 40 years he's been doing it now, 40 years of travels with the king, and they've taken a couple of pieces from each artist that's ever done it and put an exhibition on at Buckingham Palace for the public to go and see.
Wow, that's quite the honor.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, well, I mean, it was. Thinking back, it was just kind of. I was younger back then, obviously, and what I loved about it was just the adrenaline rush of some of the things we did. Obviously, I took the art bit seriously, and I did some good work afterwards. Although, I mean, the work I did for it was not the kind of stuff I do now. It wasn't mythological or anything. It was just literally kind of recording some of the scenes that I'd seen and then doing kind of paintings and drawings of them when I got back to the studio. You needed to take a camera really because you were going from place to place quite quickly. You would spend half an hour in one place, jump in the motorcade, and then head to the next place. But I remember some of the things we did were crazy. We went to Petra in Jordan for a day trip. And saw the kind of ruins. I don't know. Most people know Petra from the kind of Indiana Jones, the third movie, the
Hmm.
Last Crusade, where they go find the Holy Grail, and then there's that fantastic temple in the side of the rock at the end. That is Petra. It's a whole place built like that. It's all built into the rocks. So we did that, and we did a trip to Wadi Rum, which is a kind of desert full of rocks and things, which they used for the Lawrence of Arabia movie and things like that. All these famous movies have used it. Again, we did a tour around there. All these things, and I remember one memory from the Canada trip. I remember flying into Toronto in two kind of small military helicopters, with the Prince of Wales and all these other guys on the tour. And I remember flying in on that, feeling a little bit queasy actually because I was sort of getting sick of the motion of these small helicopters. But yeah, it was just an amazing sort of experience really at the time. Uh, Very fond memories of all that. Um, but yeah, amazing to be invited on it. And at the time, and then of course, I got to speak to the Prince of Wales. I mean, in very close quarters for most of the kind of 10 days that I was there.
Right on. I hope you like Toronto. That's actually where I'm based out of personally.
Yeah,
I hope the
yeah. Well,
visit was
what
well.
what surprised me was the size of it. Really, I mean, I live near Edinburgh here in Scotland, which I think of as a city. But Toronto must be 10 times bigger, if that. Absolutely huge with big skyscrapers and everything, which was yeah, it was pretty crazy.
So how did you first land that initial tour that you did when mentioned you were in your late 20s? Was it just like your professors or tutors had recommended you, or how does one even
No,
get that opportunity?
yeah, it was slightly by accident almost. I mean, at the time, I just finished college, and I was featured in an art magazine. And I was lucky enough actually that I knew the assistant editor, and they put my work in this art magazine, a sort of prominent feature in the middle. And back then, that's how you got seen. Really, there was no, there wasn't much of the internet in
Hmm.
terms of people viewing art online or anything like that. It was all art magazines were the way that you kind of got out there. So yeah, I was featured in an art magazine, and he had seen it or somebody had shown him it, and he liked the work. So it was kind of on his personal invite that I was asked to do it.
Wow, that is quite the honor. And
Yeah.
when it comes to interacting with with royalty, because I know the queen had there's like this certain like list of rules in terms of how you could uh, approach her or talk to her, or
Yeah.
certain things that you had to do just for ceremony. I'm guessing you had a bit of a crash course to that when it came to the Prince of Wales. Well, now the king.
Well, yeah, people ask me about that a lot, but he was very relaxed. Before I met him, his personal secretary and all that was saying, like, look, you have to call him Your Majesty, and you have to kind of bow, and you meet him. And then I kind of met him for the first time, and he just put his hand out to shake hands, and you're like, oh, wait, I've got things I've got to do here. And
Hmm.
then he didn't really care. He didn't care that much. He was quite relaxed about the whole thing, and yeah, it was nice. He knew who I was really before I was even met him. He kind of knew my work and knew who I was, and it was very nice. It was very pleasant to chat to him. He was very easy to talk to.
Right on. That's cool, man. You were in the midst of a historical figure.
Yeah, well, the strange thing when you meet somebody as famous as that, and you feel like you've known them since you were a kid because they're always on the news, and
Hmm.
there's all these here in the UK, especially all these satirical programs about these public figures. Like I remember as a kid watching a show called Spitting Image, which you wouldn't have got over there, I don't suppose. It was very much a British kind of humour, very anti-politics, anti-royals. Just taking they were puppets. They made puppets out of these famous figures, and yeah, he was a prominent kind of figure on Spitting Image. The whole royal family was, and yeah, there you go. It was that kind of thing. Um, and yeah, and then you meet him in real life, and it's like, wow, this is really surreal. I'm sitting talking to this face that I've known my whole life at a distance. So yeah, it takes a few minutes to get used to it.
Very interesting. Now, when you mentioned he was quite the art collector himself, that beggars the
Mm.
question: what the hell was this all about?
All right, yeah.
What
I'm not
was?
sure if he would. I'm not sure if he would like that or not. To be honest, it's a kind of weird one, isn't it? I mean, what's his name? Is it Tim Yeo? The artist. He's done lots of kind of political figures in the past. He did a famous painting of Tony Blair, I think.
Yeah,
But
he's. I think that's
yeah,
the artist right there.
yeah. Has he got the name there? Or is it
Let me see here. Jonathan Yeo. Yeah.
Jonathan Yeo? That's it. I knew it was Yeo or something. Jonathan Yeo. Yeah, he's quite a sort of prominent portrait painter here in the UK. So he's done plenty of famous figures in the past. I think he's the son of a prominent political figure, actually. So it's almost like he had a way into that whole inner circle.
Mm.
But yeah, I didn't mind the painting that much. It was a bit different, to be honest. But a lot of people just kind of poked fun at it, and I think the problem with it is he just disappears into like you know, it just reminds me of some sort of horror movie almost, like a kind of background of blood and guts. So it's a kind of yeah, it's a weird one.
Yeah, that was basically like what I saw on the internet when people are talking about it. They were like, I mean, this is kind of satanic in some ways. It is just
Yeah,
very odd choice of color to make the whole thing shades of blood essentially, and then like the weird little touch with the butterfly on his shoulder. I'm not even sure what that's meant to be a symbol of. But yeah, some people got like really deep and like into it as the internet does, and trying to find some conspiracy theory angle to it. But yeah, the just the
right.
whole feeling around the painting was just very strange. I was like, this is like his first royal portrait. I mean, as a man who's been in the royal family
Yeah,
all his life and been around art, it just I don't know, it seemed like a weird choice.
yeah. Well, it would have been done from sort of photographs. So maybe the king didn't really realize, until it was too late what he was up to. But I think what strikes me about it is it would be easily interpreted by somebody who's not a fan of the royals or a fan of the British Empire, if you like. It would almost be like, oh, this is the blood of all
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
colonial kind of guilt.
Yeah.
That's what I would sort of interpret it as, which is not a good look, really.
No, no, not ideal. And I was actually going to ask also because even from my limited understanding of UK politics, I know for a fact that um, Scotland, Ireland, uh, and Wales. Let's not
Wales.
forget Wales. Yes,
Yeah.
um, don't exactly have a particularly strong friendship with England in
Mm.
some regards of their history. Did you at any point feel conflicted about going on these tours or being so close to them? Because some of my friends that are from the UK, they're very vocal in
Right.
let's say their feelings towards the,
Yeah.
the
I'm not.
royals.
Yeah. I'm slightly strangely apolitical almost. I can see both sides of it. I'm not. When we had the independence referendum here in Scotland, it was split 50-50 between those who wanted to leave the United Kingdom and those who wanted to stay. You know, and I was happy to stay. I wasn't. I'm not a fan of nationalism. I don't like this kind of them and us sort of thing. Um, so yeah, but I tend not to get too worked up by these things. I'm not. If I think long and hard about it, you know, a royal family in this day and age doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean,
Mm.
but at the time, I was quite happy. I mean, how many times are you going to get asked to do something like that in your life? So I was just like, yeah, no, I'm gonna, I'm gonna go for this. I'm not one to turn something down because of a political view that I've got. I tend to be quite sort of offhand with these things.
Oh, I mean, certainly. I mean, just to be in the same room as them, like regardless of your feelings,
Yeah,
it's a once in a lifetime experience that, if you turn it down, like there's a good chance that you will never ever ever be able to interact with them. And like whatever your feelings of the royals, um one way or another, they're intertwined with history. I mean, how could anyone possibly turn down such an opportunity
yeah,
just
yeah,
at least be there in the room? You don't have to love the guy, you don't have to admire him, but just to be there among the people of that caliber for even a brief moment.
yeah. Well, I mean, my wife would have left me, I think, if I'd turned it down anyway. She's really quite sort of pro royal, pro United Kingdom. Um, but she's actually lived in England most of her life and then came up to Scotland sort of latterly as a teenager. So yeah, she was very against sort of Scottish independence, and she's not anti-royal in any way. And actually, when we went to the exhibition down at Buckingham Palace, we went there in June. No, was it July? I think it was July actually. We went down to the exhibition, and she got to meet the king and have a chat with him, which was yeah, she was very pleased to get that opportunity.
No, right on. And so moving forward in the future, do you think that you'll have another opportunity to go? Because from what you mentioned now, so some of your
Yeah,
works now are in the Royal Collection, as you said.
yeah, that's right. I'm not sure. I mean, artists. I mean, I was lucky. I got asked twice. And both my tours were great tours. We did loads of Canada. We did it all. I think we did 5 or 6 different cities. All over Canada. And then in the Jordan and Turkey one, that was really amazing tour to be asked to go on. So I feel that I'm lucky enough to have got to do those 2 tours. Some artists will go, a tour that was only say 4 days or 5 days long. Um, so yeah, and I don't know who. I think there are maybe some artists who get to do more than 2 tours, but I'm not sure. I mean, I think he tries to ask as many different artists as possible, to give more people a, a that opportunity. Um, so if they asked me to do it again, yeah, I would say yes at the drop of a hat because it's just an amazing experience. But yeah, the work, I wouldn't necessarily enjoy doing the work. That would be the only problem. Is I don't really do that kind of work anymore. Um, all the work I do now, I can just kind of please myself most of the time and do these mythological story led things. Whereas on the tours, the work I did was just really, documenting bits of the tour. I think with the Canada trip, actually, I did mostly sort of military things because that's mostly what we did. We kind of went to all these regiments and things that he was, tied to. and so I ended up doing quite a few pieces based on the sort of the military personnel.
I see. Now, which one of these works that you've made here is now like in the Royal Collection, or would it be not one that you've posted about?
Oh no, no, there's no. I think I did post it underneath the news story. There was, I tweeted about it a while ago. There's a news story then. So it's like a sort of portrait of a standing guard in Petra, and he was standing in the doorway of the famous temple from the Indiana Jones movie. I think if you scroll down, you should find it somewhere. There it is, yeah.
That's the one.
So
Okay.
that was, yeah. So, that's not the kind of work that I would tend to do these days. But at the time, basically what I did was, I managed to get a really nice shot of this guy standing in the doorway. And then when I got back to the studio, did a decent sized oil painting of it based on that. Um, and, it turned out well enough, but it's just kind of oil painted sort of photorealism.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, not something that'll ever happen probably just because of the scale of work is too great as we said earlier for comics, but it would be really
Mhm.
cool if you were to do um instead of like a single tableau frame of your interpretation of one of these stories in Greek myths, but if you had like even just a single comic, maybe not about the Odyssey, maybe not as something as all encompassing as that, but just one of the smaller stories if you were to illustrate a comic showing the story over time instead of just a single frame. That's something that
Yeah.
would be quite interesting.
Yeah, it would be an awful lot of work though, and I'm not sure, how much, to be hard nosed about it, how much you would kind of earn doing something like that, I mean, I'm a full time artist, so I make all my money from selling art. And to do a comic book like that in this kind of style would be, it could ruin you financially, I would imagine, actually, unless you had Marvel or somebody behind you.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would gladly buy an issue, especially if you made it so that
Mhm.
it wasn't just like a limited drop and people could get it printed on demand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was quite a positive reception to it. Now, like I said, I understand that's a hell of an undertaking, beyond just a
Yeah.
single painting and how long that takes for you. But no, I think there'll be quite the audience for it.
Mhm.
If you were to do that, but no, that's amazing, man. That is nothing short of incredible that you were able to, start your career as an act of rebellion, which I mean, even like when we talked about in the beginning, it's just kind of funny how that was what you were rebelling against, this postmodernist loss of meaning. Um,
Yeah.
and now you've gone to the point where your work is exhibited in Buckingham Palace. It's kind of larger than life. You've kind of become a myth unto yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, I do. It is a bit ironic, I suppose, in some ways that I'm now into NFTs, which is kind of the very latest art market. The very latest sort of art scene, if you like. And very very digital based, very internet based. And very sort of cutting edge in that sense.
Mhm.
And yet my work does seem to fit in quite well, really.
Well, it's something that's truly unique. I mean, it's it's unlike anything I've ever really seen before. I mean, like I'll come across people that will do hyper realistic depictions of figures or like just anatomical parts and whatnot. But in terms of people that actually take the myths of old and bring them to life through a new unique perspective, can't say that I've really encountered many people that do that. Maybe I just haven't found them, but your work certainly
Yeah.
stands out in that regard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a strange mix of being really stubborn and refusing to kind of bend or do something else. And then using, I guess, the talents that I had for depicting a human figure and things, which always seemed something quite natural to me. It was always something I was interested in. And then this just, yeah, it all just seems to come together in this work that I've ended up doing. And I guess that is, I suppose, quite unique.
No, it's certainly something. Now, in terms of for the future of your work, do you have any plans, aspirations, like any stories that you'd like to depict? Anything that you have on the horizon?
Well, at the moment, I'm concentrating on this series of Minotaur pieces that I was talking to you about before we actually went on air.
Hmm.
So it's going to be these four images based on this idea that the Minotaur escapes from the labyrinth. If anyone wants to check my pinned tweet, that's the kind of my very latest piece. That was on Transient Labs curated. Yeah, there it is there. So the idea was, as I said to you, that Theseus has left the Minotaur for dead and escaped from the maze, but he's left behind the thread which enabled him to escape. And the Minotaur's kind of found it and is going to sort of nurse himself back to health and then be able to find his own way out of the labyrinth. So there'll be four images, kind of almost, I guess, almost like a comic book, but separated into these four different pieces. And there will be bidders editions, black and white ones that go along with it, that tell other slight side stories based on the main story there. And I think that to be honest, that will take me up until middle of next year, I imagine, before I'm kind of finished all that, because each one takes a long time. And then beyond that, I was hoping that if this is a success, that I can take the Minotaur out into the kind of real world and have him have other adventures, whatever I kind of feel like doing in future with him. Um, and there's always, yeah, I mean, I'll probably, after doing this series, I'll probably think to myself, well, I'll take a Minotaur break, if you like, and look for something else. I'd like to do Medusa again. I've never really properly depicted Medusa as a kind of a full kind of storied piece. I've done a couple of small oil painted sort of portraits of Medusa, two or three I've done, I think, over the years, but never made it into a kind of big epic sort of piece. So I might, and people always ask me, "Oh, have you done Medusa? Have you done the Gorgons? That kind of thing." So that's certainly something I would probably try at some point fairly soon.
Yeah, and once the Minotaur goes out into the world, and you can paint him standing in line at Tesco's.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it'll be, yeah. I'm not really sure exactly what, but I've got two or three ideas in my head of things I want to do when he's out of the labyrinth, if you like. They won't be as mundane as that, but it'll just be things like that kind of idea of Frankenstein's monster discovering the world for the first time. This kind of tragic figure, out and about, confused and not going around eating people or anything. It's not going to be a horror story. It's more really from his viewpoint. My sympathies are kind of with the Minotaur rather than with those trying to imprison him and to kill him or whatever. So yeah, that would be kind of the general theme of it. And it would be they would all be sort of surreal, paintings.
Yeah, standing at a market, trading drachmas for skins,
Yeah,
pelts, what
or
have you, something like that.
yeah, yeah, um, yeah. We'll just see. I'm not really sure. And if there's always a possibility that I do these four pieces and then decide, actually, now I've had enough of the Minotaur, and then just go off and do something else.
Ah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, look, it's gotten you this far, right?
Yeah,
Right on. That's
but yeah, a
that's
lot of
awesome.
these things when I'm looking for a subject or when I'm looking for a new thing to do, I quite often I'll kind of revisit older stuff as well. Go back to pieces that I did years ago, which I felt I hadn't done justice, or maybe there was a different viewpoint I could take, or a different aspect of the myth I could explore. I never really get stuck for things things to paint. Um, so yeah, so it's not something I really worry about.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a wealth of stories to draw upon, and a million interpretations for each one. So that'll certainly keep you going for a while. Now I realize we're about to hit the 2 hour mark there, and I don't want to keep you for
Magic
longer
sticks, yeah.
than you have to be. Is there anything else that you wanted to discuss before we close it off then?
Um, I'm not really sure. No, I don't think so. It's just whatever. um, I think we've covered most of the interesting stuff. You know, yeah, people are usually fascinated by the choice of Greek myth as a sort of subject matter, and it's never an easy one to answer. You know, I've kind of made a joke of it almost as whenever I'm even in real life exhibitions, when I've had exhibitions at galleries in real life, somebody always comes up and says, "Oh, why Greek myth? Why Greek myth?" And it's such a difficult one to answer. You know, we've gone into discussions here as to how these myths have continued relevance and things like that. But the reality is that they're just really cool stories. That you can tell and retell and shape. I like the fact, as I said to you earlier, that you can kind of take them as a template and then do other things with them. In a way that you couldn't with, say, the crucifixion of Christ or things that people actually still believe in. The Greek myths.
Hmm.
You've got quite a lot of leeway in terms of reinterpretation. Um, and yeah, they're still very much part of our culture, even though people don't necessarily even recognise it. Sometimes in very obvious ways, like the Percy Jackson movies and Clash of the Titans and all those kind of things, or the new Odyssey movie. And then other times, just in the fact that when people are reading Shakespeare and stuff, they don't realise they're reading different variations on Greek myth.
Well, even in some of the symbols that we have in our day-to-day lives, I mean, the one of the more famous symbols for the medical profession is that the
Yeah,
staff
that's right.
with the two snakes intertwining. I forget the actual the ties to mythology, but I know that it does have links to it historically.
Yeah, yeah. It was there was a famous healer called Asclepius, I think, in Greek mythology, and it was something to do with his symbol. But I think it's also tied to like the caduceus of Hermes. I can
Hmm.
never quite remember the exact specifics of it. But yeah, it's definitely from Greek myth. It's a famous symbol.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right
there it
on.
is. The caduceus.
Well, thank you, Paul. I really appreciate that we've finally had the chance to speak, and that you've been able to explain all of this at length. Because as you said, it's hard to condense something like this, your
Mm.
appreciation for it, or your process in a quick 5 minute conversation at a gallery. So I'm really glad that you've had the chance to explain it all, because I've been wanting to know for months, and I'm glad that we've finally had the chance to give you the opportunity to speak on it, because it's yeah, your work is one of one. I have yet to encounter any artists
Yeah.
that uh, even come close to that. I mean, I'll still be looking at your pieces in the future, wondering like to what extent was it all done manually or digitally. And no, they're
Mhm.
absolutely fantastic. So I thank you for your time here.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Well, yeah, I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been fascinating discussion, and yeah, thanks for your kind words regarding the work and for showcasing it. Always helps to get these things across to people.
Of course, yeah. So people can find you at Minotaur_man on all your socials.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sometimes people ask me what that means, the Minotaur Man, and it's basically years and years ago. I started on Twitter back in 2011, as you can see in my profile. Been on here a long time. Um, and back when I was looking for a kind of not a pseudonym, but a name that wasn't just Paul Reid.
Hmm.
Um, I was remembering a couple of years before that, I'd spoken to a gallery owner on the phone who was interested in maybe showing some of my work down in London. And I said to him, "Oh, so do you know my work?" And he said, "Oh yeah, you're the Minotaur Man, right?" Um, and he'd remembered seeing one of my Minotaur paintings, and that's what he'd stuck in his head was the Minotaur. So I was the Minotaur Man in his head, and I just thought, yeah, that'll do for a kind of a pseudonym, if you like.
Yeah, I mean that's as good a title as any to describe your work.
Yep, yep.
Right on. So yeah, thank you everyone for tuning in. Please do check out Paul's work here. He's gonna have more collections in the future. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to even get a physical copy if you bid high enough. So yeah, by all means, have at it.
Yeah, that's
And
right. Yeah,
wish you all the best in your work, Paul. I'm really looking forward to this new series and everything that you do in the future. And yeah, thanks again for coming on.
brilliant. Yeah, well, thanks for having me again. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you.